So, this goes way beyond your typical story of good versus evil. We're actually stepping into a kind of celestial courtroom here to witness an archangel's inner struggle after a divine verdict is handed down on the very purpose of darkness itself.
So, the Lord's final word, it just hangs in the air, a truth as vast and absolute as the cosmos. And in this profound quiet, that's where understanding has to be forged. That little flicker of red, it's gone. Mephistopheles has just vanished, leaving behind a logic so twisted it almost profanes the very act of reason. But you know, his cynicism, it's nothing compared to the weight of the Lord's permissiveness. Now that is a terrible, breathtaking mystery. So you have to be wondering, right? What was this big cosmic exchange that left an archangel completely reeling? Well, to really get it, we have to go back to the beginning of my report, back to the unblemished horror I first witnessed.
You have to understand, before the tempter even showed up, before the Lord laid out this grand architecture of his plan, there was just the vision, my own report, and that is the baseline of truth here, an archangel's pure, undiluted perception of evil before it was ever cloaked in purpose.
I saw Bald Mountain, and let me tell you, I saw it for what it truly is, just this festering wound on the spinning orb of night. I reported on the moon's sickly gleam, a light that didn't illuminate anything, it just highlighted a broken dream. And out of that chaos, the black god, Chernobog, rose up to summon the lost and compose what I can only describe as a symphony of terror. The grief was so overwhelming that a great wailing chorus from the heavenly hosts themselves echoed my own despair. Now for me, an archangel of healing, this spectacle, it's more than just horrifying. It's a profane parody of everything I stand for. Where I am sent to mend, he exists only to shatter. Where I bring peace, he cultivates fear. He is the very architect of the brokenness I was literally created to heal.
And this really illustrates the challenge, doesn't it? The horror was so absolute, so pure, that even its human creators struggled with how to capture something they called unmitigated evil. They actually debated whether to portray it as just some cheap thrill or as the deep, allegorical struggle it truly represents.
But then, my perfectly clear, absolute vision of evil, it got poisoned by this cynical rationale. See, the presence of Chernobog, that's a familiar horror, but the justification for his reign, whoa, that was a completely new and deeply unsettling argument.
And Mephistopheles, he doesn't even try to defend darkness. No, he markets it. He reframes this absolute abomination as some kind of useful tool. First, he just dismisses the horror as a lively fray, like it's just entertainment. Then, he calls it a necessary chaos that you need in order to appreciate peace. And finally, the most venomous claim of all, that this whole display of depravity actually makes the virtuous strong by testing their will.
And he's not just some philosopher sitting on the sidelines. Oh no. With this final taunt, he basically announces he's jumping into the fray. He's gonna help the dance along, to make the error, the evil, even more potent. He just revels in being a corrupting agent. And then poof, he's gone.
And that's the question that just exploded in my mind. As he was speaking, I just had to wonder, could this logic, this profane utilitarian view of suffering, could it possibly have a place in the Lord's divine plan?
Well, the answer, when it finally came, became the very heart of all my turmoil. Look, it's one thing to face the abyss, it's something else entirely to be told it actually has a place on the map of creation. So now we have to grapple with the Lord's final and deeply paradoxical verdict. What's fascinating is that the Lord doesn't even bother to debate Mephistopheles. He just reframes him entirely. So where the tempter sees evil as this useful tool for contrast, the Lord sees it as a permitted force, one that's serving a much bigger divine plan. And while the tempter argues it's a test, the Lord declares its power is temporary and finite, that it's destined to be broken by the morning light.
Okay, so how do we make sense of this, right? How can absolute goodness allow for such darkness? Well, the answer lies in this single, incredibly powerful metaphor, the one that defines the final harvest.
And with this, the Lord cuts right to the heart of it all. He frames Chernobog's role not as some great rival, but as an unwitting servant. So in this divine economy, evil is basically like a laborer. It's out there tilling the rough soil of human experience. Its power, it's subordinate. Its purpose isn't even its own. It works the field, right? It creates all this chaos and challenge, but the final harvest, the grain, the souls themselves, that belongs only to the Lord. Its reign is temporary, just a tool for a plan it can't even begin to comprehend.
And this is the ultimate point. The Lord allows the horror of the night to happen with this divine confidence, this certainty that once humanity sees it all, they will freely, and this is the important part, consciously choose the light. Goodness and order will triumph, not through ignorance, but through choice.
So as the final strains of Ave Maria begin to rise, we're left with this massive question. If a force as dark and absolute as Chernobog can, in the end, serve a divine plan, what does that reveal about the nature of purpose itself? I mean, what shadows in our own lives might just be tilling the soil for a harvest we can't yet see?